Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today, we're talking about episode 31, Stock Tip. As per usual, we will start with a brief summary of the episode. Fran takes Gracie to a posh Park Avenue market in the hopes of meeting a man. Their trip is more than successful. Fran meets Glenn, who works on Wall Street, and Gracie has filled the cart with sugary breakfast treats. On Fran's day off, Glenn comes to the house to pick her up for their date in the Hamptons, but Glenn really hits it off with Maxwell. Meanwhile, Cece wants to invest the company profits in a vacation home on Martha's Vineyard, but Maxwell decides instead to put the money into a stock tip from Glenn. While eating the aforementioned amassed sugary breakfast treats, Brighton realizes he bears an uncanny resemblance to Snap from Rice Krispies, so Fran takes him shopping to revamp his look. While out on the town, they stop to get hot dogs and discover that Glenn is not actually a stockbroker, but rather he's a hot dog vendor. Fran tries to get Cece to kill the deal, but Cece refuses. Fran races down to the Manhattan Men's Club to try to stop it herself, but can't get in because of her sex. Dressed up as Mr. Wilbur Ed, Fran sneaks into the club. The conversation between Glenn and Maxwell about Fran distracts her from her mission of putting the kibosh on the stock purchase. Once she gets back on target, Fran and Glenn play tug of war with the check and end up in a slap fight, resulting in Maxwell effectively getting punched in the nose and Glenn crashing into a wall. Fran comes clean to Maxwell about her identity and Glenn's profession, and she ends up ending things with Glenn, who, as we learned, actually was a stockbroker in the 1980s. I think those are the major points. Bernadette, is there anything you want to add?
No, that was great.
All right, would you like to take us to scene one?
Yes, so we begin in the kitchen, and in the kitchen we have, Cece following Maxwell, trying to explain to him, if you don't jump on this, someone else will, to which Niles, of course, says, she's bluffing, sir. But it turns out, after a look, she's talking about a house on Martha's Vineyard.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, there is some money that, she wants to invest from the company into this vacation home. She would like to go, imagine you're out there, you're just on the beach, tanning, stuff like that. And of course, Niles is like, oh, someone will tow you out to see if your blowhole gets clogged.
Right, because she said, I can see myself lying on the beach for days. And she's saying in like such a happy way. And Niles takes it for a turn.
As Niles does.
As he does, right? Yes.
As he does. But, Fran's getting ready to take Gracie out to the grocery store. And of course, people are like teasing her because she's secretly trying to look for men there instead of groceries.
Not so secretly, I'd say.
Yeah, but she does say groceries. But again, everybody's making fun of her. She does make a mention that, because, they're talking about the different types of grocery stores and like investments and stuff. And I guess Fran's dad had invested one time in a big and tall men's kind of store,
right?
To which Maxwell points out, oh, those are pretty successful. And she says, well, not in Tokyo. And again, she mentions, well, they're going to a fancy Park Avenue market instead of, one of those gas station convenience stores. Although, you know what? Val did meet someone there, although he used her as a human shield.
Correct.
Yes. Cece makes note that she does her shopping late at night, to which Niles is like, that makes sense. And I think this is what he says. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It makes sense if a man is hungry, any old thing will do.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay. Classic Niles. So anyway, basically this initial scene is setting up that Fran and Gracie are going to go to this fancy grocery store. And in addition to getting groceries, one of the things they'll be looking for is a man.
Correct. I'll just put a little bit more color into this. So, after after Cece tries to like pitch the house on Martha's Vineyard, Maxwell says that he's not going to jump on anything. He's going to explore all his options, which is when Fran says that's a good idea. You know, my father invested in the Big and Tall store, and he's like, oh, those are very successful. She's like, not the one in Tokyo, implying that like maybe if her dad had done a little bit more research, it would have gone a little better. At which point Gracie races in. She's in her little dress and she has her coat on. She's like, okay, Fran, I'm ready to go pick up guys. And Fran corrects her, groceries, honey, groceries.
Yep.
And Maxwell's sort of like shocked that Fran would even consider dating someone she met at the grocery. And that's when she gets into, it's a fancy Park Avenue market. Like it's not a mini mart at a gas station. So that's all I wanted to add. Shall I take us to the grocery store?
Yes, take us to the fancy Park Avenue market.
It looked like quite a grocery store. I'm not gonna lie. So Fran and Gracie are in the grocery store, and Fran warns her to go easy on the candy because otherwise your teeth are gonna fall. There's so much sugar, your teeth are gonna fall out. And Gracie smartly, I think, responds, Fran, baby teeth are supposed to fall out. God made them that way so children can eat all the candy they wanted. And Fran recognizes that it was a clever comment, but not quite, fitting, because as she says, if God was so benevolent, your hips would fall off when you turn 30. But anyway, so Gracie gets turned down for all the chocolate that she wanted. And so they're, going through the market, and Fran's explaining to her, everything you need to know about a man you can find right in his cart. If there's a box of Midol, keep moving. Corn pads means he lives with his mother. Learn that the hard way. And if you see two guys with sweaters tied around their necks buying pesto, save yourself the pain. And so, Gracie picks out a guy as they're walking. What about him? Like, basically, what can you learn from him? Fran peers into his cart and says, let's see here. Cabbage, chili, refried beans. Whew. One dinner with him, you spend the rest of the night blaming the dog. So needless to say, that guy was out. And so, they round the corner, and what happens, but they hit cart. Fran's cart gets hit by this other cart, and it's this decent looking guy. And he says to her, well, this is probably a stupid question since you've obviously never been on a diet in your life. And she's like, me? Hardly. And she reaches into the cart and grabs the box of Dexatrim and hands it to Gracie. Get rid of this. And so the guy asks Fran, are these fat-free cakes any good? And he's holding a box. And Fran's like, oh, they're delish. If you smear them with some butter, then fry them lightly on both sides, and then a squirt of whipped cream puts it right over the top. And he says to her, personally, I like whipped cream on everything. And Fran reacts, hoo-ha, well, I'd be happy to give you a recipe for your wife. And he's like, I'm not married. I'm going to pause there and ask, do people flirt like that in real life? Or is this just like something that happens on sitcoms? Because I truly don't know.
I have not personally witnessed this, so I don't know. Listeners, let us know in the comments.
Please do. And also let us know if that was good flirting, because I also didn't think it was that great.
Let us know.
please let us know. So anyway, obviously Fran is very taken by this guy, and Gracie uses it to her advantage and asks, can we get these? And Fran's reaction is just, knock yourself out, honey. She doesn't even look at the super sugary breakfast cereals that Gracie's putting in the cart. And so the guy, who will soon learn his name is Glenn, says, oh, cute daughter. And Fran's like, oh, I'm not her mother. I'm Fran, her single nanny. And so he introduces himself as Glenn. And so she then does what she was just telling Gracie to do. She peers into his cart and says, I see bacon, pork rinds, and Virginia ham. Well, I know one thing, you're not a rabbi. And he's like, my cover is blown. And then he says, I work on Wall Street. That's how he describes his profession. And so she then says, oh, a stockbroker. So what's the matter? Can't stay away from the market? Like, she jumps from working on Wall Street to him being a stockbroker.
Yes.
So
yeah. And he laughs like really hard at that last crack of like, can't stay away from the market. He's like, ha 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 ha, like in her face.
Right. And he doesn't correct her. He doesn't nothing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you want to add to that scene, or would you like to take us to breakfast?
Well, again, like, so Gracie comes a couple of times with various boxes
Oh,
of
yes.
sugary cereal. So, yeah, go for it, babe, like all that stuff. And at the end, she's holding up one, there's a prize in it, got lucky. And Fran's like, you and me both.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Correct.
yes. But yes, I will take us to breakfast next morning in the dining room. There are a lot of cereal boxes on on the table, and Maxwell says, "Niles, you've outdone yourself."
Correct.
And Niles says, "Would you like another Pop-Tart?"
Right.
And Maxwell though would actually like more of the leprechaun things, which again, assuming Lucky Charms.
Right.
And then
Especially, yeah,
Niles says in his classic sardonic, kind of way, they are magically delicious.
exactly.
And again, Fran's looking at one of the boxes too, says she thinks she sees Mary Lou Retton, and it's probably life-sized,
Mm-hmm.
crack at her height. But she explains, she's dressed up, she's going to go to the Hamptons.
Right. Maxwell
And
asks what she's doing on her day off.
yes, and she's going to the Hamptons, and it's with the guy she met at the grocery store. So of course, immediately Maxwell and Niles are making fun. So Maxwell asks, "Oh, did he use the classic line of paper or plastic?"
Right.
And then she's like, "No, no, no." And I can't remember the exact thing. He's higher, or like
He's way,
what does
she
she
says something like he's way better than that, or way bigger than that. Something like that,
something
implying.
like that? Yes. And then so Niles asks, "Does he use a hose?" And she says, kind of in a flirty way, "That depends on how hot we get." Um, so again, Gra- Gracie runs through, "Hi, bye, Dad." And Fran notes, "Oh, breakfast just kicked in." Because again, a lot of sugar. Meanwhile, though, Brighton is having a realization.
Mm-hmm.
He's looking at the Rice Krispies box and he realizes that he dresses like Snap, uh, and the little elf. And he's having like a little crisis about this.
Just a little,
Uh,
yeah.
yes, but the doorbell rings, and so Fran's like, "Oh, that's Glenn, the stockbroker from the grocery store." And Maxwell
Hold
says,
on. Before you say what, because her
"Okay,
wording, I think it's important because of what you're about to say. She says,
yes,
"Oh, that must be Glenn, my stockbroker from the
okay,
grocery store."
yes."
Now go ahead.
So Maxwell says, "Niles, my butler from England, will answer the door."
Right.
And Fran asks, though, before they leave the dining room, how does she look? And she is wearing this again as something we kind of need to discuss here. Is
Mm-hmm.
I believe she's worn it before. Correct me
Mm-hmm.
if I'm wrong.
I think she wore it in the episode from Flushing with sorry, was it Schlepped Away? The episode where they get stuck at Fran's parents' house because
Oh,
of the
okay.
snowstorm. I think she's wearing that, and she wore it another time before that as well.
Yeah. So we've seen this outfit before, but basically it's a colored like blazer, would you say?
Yeah, it's like a
Like
jacket. I call it more of a
jacket.
jacket.
And it's like vertical stripes. There's red, I think yellow.
Yep, green,
Yeah.
red.
Yeah.
Like
So vertical stripes. It's kind of varying lengths of the stripes, right? Like it's not
yeah, but I think go ahead.
yeah, it's not like
It's hard to
straight
describe.
across. Yeah.
No.
I mean, but basically to her outfit, Maxwell says, "Oh, it looks festive." And she's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Festive?" And um as she goes to leave, Maxwell hands her a bowl of fruit and says, here's your hat." So
Correct.
again, kind of teasing her about her look. Um, is there anything you want to add?
No,
Okay. Take us to the living room, Debbie.
I would love to. So we basically relocate over to the living room because Glenn has come, and Fran introduces this is Glenn, the stockbroker, and Maxwell kind of has this like he knows she's going to say the stockbroker, and he says it with her. And Fran introduces Maxwell Sheffield, my boss. And Glenn says, "This is an honor. I saw your last play 6 times." And Niles, again in his Niles way, comments, "The family only had to sit through it twice." Everyone looks at him. And the second time was even better.
Mm-hmm.
But Glenn explains that the reason he saw it 6 times is because I think you had to see it more than once to fully comprehend the metaphor. "What metaphor?" asks Maxwell. And Glenn explains, Adam and Eve, original sin. I mean, that's why she never ate the ribs, right? And Max, like, it's like a light bulb goes off in Maxwell's head. God, that's clever. I missed that. Which is sort of disappointing for Maxwell.
Mm-hmm.
But as they're talking, Fran, she wants to go. Like, they're going to the Hamptons for lobster lunch or dinner or whatever.
Pound lobster.
6 pounds, yes. And as we know from the episode material, Fran, lobsters were $19.99 a pound or $19.95 a pound. But as they're like walking towards the door, Glenn gets distracted by this piece of artwork, which is basically like a naked bust. We see the back of it, and they're talking about whether it's a Robert Graham, and Maxwell says that he has, yes, it is, and Fran says, "Okay, well, meanwhile, there's a 6-pound lobster getting his affairs in order," like trying to rush Glenn out the door. And Maxwell instead offers to show Glenn the companion piece, which is upstairs in the bedroom. And of course, Glenn wants to see it. And he says, "I'll bet it's worth twice what you paid for it." And Maxwell's like, "Well, if it is, I'll sell it to you." And they're racing up the stairs to the master bedroom. And Fran's like putting her coat on. Query why Glenn is like racing upstairs to go look at art with Maxwell. But she says to Niles, "It's so nice that the 3 of us are getting closer. My cousin Meryl's husband had a friend named Sam. The 3 of them did everything together, except Meryl wasn't much of a dancer, so sometimes the 2 guys would go out together. Hey," like she realizes, wait a minute, she's getting cut out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to add anything?
No. You did a great job.
Thank you. Would you like to take us to the office?
Yes. So we are in Maxwell's office, and again, there is Maxwell at his desk. There's Cece and Fran. And I believe is Niles hanging around there too?
Niles is there, yes.
Yes, Niles often is.
Yes.
But basically, I think he's on the. Is he already on the phone as we enter the scene? Not yet. Okay. So Maxwell gets on. He gets a call. It's Glenn. So Fran, of course, goes for it. But Maxwell keeps talking to Glenn. And they're chatting. I guess they had previously
played squash.
Squash together. And so they're chatting, and then Fran meanwhile is like, "What's going on?" She tries to get the phone. And Maxwell kind of says, "Oh, Fran, yeah, she's right here," but then hangs up.
Right. And again, Fran thinks that she's going to get the phone.
Yep. Nope.
No.
He hangs up. And basically, Maxwell's thanking Fran for introducing him to Glenn. Glenn mentioned a fabulous stock. He thinks that they should invest that money into that stock. And Cece is whining, like legitimately whining about wanting the Hampton home. And
Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, sorry. You're right. Martha's Vineyard. But she's like legitimately whining. And, this one has a servant shack behind the dunes. We could put Niles there when he's not serving us.
When he's not waiting on us.
Oh,
it's even more like obnoxious the way she describes it.
Oh, yeah. But she says this kind of like as she's walking by Niles, and she
Mm-hmm.
goes to sit at the little couch, and Niles is near the desk, and he's like, lemon cake? And, she said, sure. And so he flings it, like a
Correct.
piece of lemon cake, like in Cece's direction.
Correct.
Um, so Fran mentions, though, that Brighton is upset about the elf resemblance
Yep.
to and Maxwell's like, "Oh, that's just a stage. When I was his age, I was quite the rebel." And he seems like very like proud of it. And so, Fran's teasing him. "Oh, did you wear brown socks and black shoes?" And he answers kind of proudly, "Sometimes."
Uh-huh.
One time I wore my dickie backwards and nobody noticed.
And no
As-
one knew.
Yes. And he's like so proud of himself. And she's like, okay. But sorry, I think that's when Glenn calls.
Yeah, you flipped the
I
order of the episode, but
sorry.
it's fine.
I apologize. So there's all this back and forth, and then Glenn calls. Again, it turns out they went to a squash game together. And the CC again, when Max was talking about the stock tip and all that stuff, like CC's like doing a childish mumbling, like under breath kind of thing. How would you describe it?
Mocking.
Yes.
Like she's like moving her lips, but you can't really hear exactly what she's saying. She's just mocking. She's not a happy camper.
Yeah. Yeah, because like Maxwell's made up his mind, basically. And I think at this point he does make plans to meet with Glenn, right?
Yeah.
To meet the next day to give the check.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So yeah. So just a quick summary. I apologize, listeners. Basically, they're talking in the office first. Maxwell mentions Glenn, but it's later on that he actually takes the phone call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and when I don't think you mentioned this, when Maxwell hangs up the phone, Glenn says hello. Oh, and by the way, thank you for introducing us. And Fran's like, oh, my pleasure. Where are you registered? Do you need a nice punch bowl?
Yes. Okay. Anything else you want to add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think other than flipping the scene around, that was perfect.
Thank you. It's one of those days.
It's fine. You got all the key points because we needed to know all those things. Okay. So the next scene is it's kind of cut in two, but it's together even very short. So we cut to, Fran walking with Brighton, who's now dressed very differently. And again, I think this is one of those times where we should talk about the fashion here. Instead of being dressed in kind of like, like a polo or a button-down shirt, like we've seen Brighton, or a t-shirt even that we've seen Brighton in, now we see him in a backwards baseball cap, oversized pants with a big belt, and an open flannel shirt over a t-shirt. And, Fran's commenting about how, he needs to pull up his pants. And he's like, no, it's cool. And she's like, no, that's Maytag repairman. This is cool. And she like pulls them up for him. Mm-hmm. And so she's hungry. And so she asks, do you want to get a hot dog? He's like, yeah. And she's imagining, the topping she's going to put on it. And he's like, and mayo. And she's like, fine, you can get your own hot dog. And so they approach a hot dog vendor. And who is the hot dog vendor? But it's none other than Glenn. Mm-hmm. And Fran is shocked. And of course, I'm not sure embarrassed is the right word, but he kind of groans when he sees her. He's mm-hmm. not happy to have been identified. Yeah. And Fran says, oh my God, you're a hot dog vendor and you're not even kosher.
Yeah.
As if like that was like, the straw that broke the camel's back, that he wasn't a kosher hot dog vendor after she'd literally just seen him purchase bacon, Virginia ham, and pork rinds. Mm-hmm. Like, should she have been surprised? I think not. That's just me. Do you want to add anything to that, or do you want to take us to the kitchen?
I'll take us to the kitchen. So of course, like Fran's talking to Niles, and she's ups- upset that, oh my gosh, I'm the one who like introduced Mr. Sheffield to this hot dog vendor. And Gracie runs through the kitchen, grabs a a box of cereal, clearly still on a sugar high. And
Mm-hmm.
and so she's like, Gracie says, I'll be in my room. Wee! And so of course Fran's like, oh, and I've got his children hooked on riboflavin. Um, I don't think I've been in this much trouble since I cornrowed my father's toupee.
Correct.
And so Niles was like, well, why don't you just get the business manager to sell the stocks? And she's like, oh, yeah, well, who's the business manager? And in walks Cece on her
Mm-hmm.
phone saying along the lines of, if you
I
have the
have it.
exact one,
I
okay,
do.
go for
No. I don't think you know who you are talking to. I've got lawyers, I've got money, and I know where you live. You will rue the day you cross CC Babcock. Bye, mummy. Kiss, kiss.
it. And then she leaves.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, well, it's Cece who's the business manager. And so
Mm-hmm.
Fran's trying to get Niles to talk with her, and Niles is like, no, she hates me more than you. And she's like, and Fran's like, no, she hates me. Um, and in walks Maggie. So
Poor Maggie.
yeah, they're like, um, okay, we'll ask Maggie. And they ask her, okay, Fran does, me or, who does Cece hate more, me or him? And Maggie's like, oh God, this is hard. And Fran kind of smugly turns to Niles and says, I make her nauseous. And he responds, I make her drink.
Yup.
Ooh. And so eventually Maggie, who's obviously having difficulty with this, says, I think she hates Niles more. To which Niles says, yes, still number one.
Right. And it's so funny to me that Maggie's like, look, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here.
Yeah.
And then she's like, Niles. But like, she clearly, if she did, like,
It's the
it's such a,
opposite of what you would think, right?
exactly. Thank you.
They're
Thank you.
trying to be the one she hates the most.
Right. Okay.
So
Sorry.
yeah.
That I'm glad you knew what I was trying to say, even though my
Yes.
my
Yeah,
brain
no.
synapses stopped functioning.
Yeah, again, it's like going against expectations.
Exactly.
But yeah. Anything you want to add to that?
No.
Okay, take us to the office.
So Fran, now that she knows that Cece hates Niles more than she hates Fran, tries to, I guess, get on Cece's good side. And she brings on a silver platter cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off and a little cherry tomato flour. And she like offers it to Cece, who is sitting at the desk writing. And Cece just kind of looks at her, takes it, there's like a beat, and then she's like, I'm dying, aren't I? And Fran's like, no, of course not. We just spend so much time together, so I think we should be friends. And Cece realizes that no, she's not dying. You want something, don't you? Nanny Fine wants something. Oh, yes. Oh, God, this is good. It's just like
really into it.
Like I tried to do it, but like it's even like more than I just did. And Fran just looks.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You can say what Fran says, because it kind of explains it.
So Fran looks at her. Are you done? You want to have a Siggy button cuddle now? Again, this is one of those jokes that we wouldn't have gotten if we watched this originally in the 90s because we were children. But as adults we get. So
I'm sure listeners understand the excitement and moaning quality with which Cece said the
oh
the
God, this is good.
Yes.
And if not, they should watch it and then try Googling Siggy butts and cuddles. Although I haven't done that, so I don't know what you'll find. Maybe don't do that.
You know what, Dave? Maybe don't do that.
Yeah, maybe don't do that. Never mind.
Maybe just watch that scene from Harry when Harry met Sally.
Yes, because that is what it makes me think of. So anyway, so Fran has to break the news to Cece, and she's like, "Do you remember Glenn, the stockbroker?" And Cece's like, "The one who cost me my beautiful vacation house." And Fran's like, "Uh-huh. And then she like picks up a tape recorder. "Is this thing on?" And she explains, he's really a hot dog vendor." And so Cece kind of laughs and is like, "So at this very minute, Maxwell is at the Manhattan Men's Club handing over $100,000 to a hot dog vendor you introduced him to." And Fran's like, "Uh-huh." And so Fran tries to get Cece to call and kill the deal. And Cece's hysterically laughing. She can't do it. And Fran's like, "It's your money too." And Cece's like, "Save a ton of money," which she puts up one hand, or "Nanny finds screwed," puts up the other hand. Woof! And like the hand representing Fran getting screwed clearly heavily outweighs the saving a ton of money.
Mm-hmm.
And so Fran again puts the phone in Cece's hand, tries to have her dial, like really tries to get Cece to kill the deal. And Cece finally is like, "Yeah, all right." And so she takes the phone and dials, and she says, "Hello, Dr. Bort. Cancel my therapy session today. I don't need it." Click.
Yeah.
Needless to say, that was
Yeah.
not
I mean,
the call Fran wanted her to make.
nope, because she is delighted, gleefully, evilly, like eating this up. She
Yes.
loves it.
Yes.
And I just had this thought just quickly before I forget. When you said $100,000, I was like, I don't think that's nearly enough to get a house on Martha's Vineyard.
No. Even then, I'm pretty sure no would be the answer. Now
Yeah.
it definitely is not.
Yeah. So anyway, that's just like something that popped into my mind as you're describing the scene again.
Yeah. Would you like to take us to
Yes. The
the
Manhattan
club?
Men's Club.
Yes.
Yes. So Fran walks in and there is a little desk. Not desk. He's standing behind it. What word? It's not coming to my mind. Like not a lectern, but
So it sort of looks like a lectern, but he's the security desk.
yes. Um and she tries to just breeze in by saying that she's Maxwell Sheffield's +1,
That
but
he's the
he,
guest, right?
yeah, stops her. No women allowed. And she's like, "What is this? The He-Man Women's Haters Club?"
Correct.
And he's like, "No women allowed." Like, and there's no way I'm gonna, like. And she's like, "Ever?" And he's like, "There's no way you're gonna figure out, how to get in." And she kind of like is like, "Oh, okay," but as she's about to leave, he turns on, like, I'm assuming there's a little
It's like a
TV.
little TV right in front.
Yes,
Yeah.
right there. And the I Love Lucy theme song plays. And that gives Fran an idea.
Was that I Love Lucy?
Yeah. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
I
Isn't
didn't.
it?
I thought it was Gilligan's Island.
I thought it was I Love Lucy because um no, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's I Love Lucy's.
Oh, is that guys? Listeners, please tell us because clearly Bernadette and I are confused. Um,
No,
well,
because I'm pretty sure what her idea is Lucy did at some point. Because I think
that I believe.
that theme song is what kind of gives her the idea.
Oh, see,
Yeah,
I thought it was Gilligan's Island because later in the next scene, when she's pretending her
yeah,
compact is
she
a phone,
references Gilligan's
right?
Island,
So I just,
but the theme song is I Love Lucy. I'm like 99% sure. But anyway, she
I'll
hears a
believe you.
theme song that gives her an idea. Do you want to take it away, Debbie?
I'm happy to. So we then cut away, or we cut back to the next scene, and there's a petite man in a suit with a beard and I think also a mustache. Um, and we determined that that is Fran dressed up as a man, and she got herself into the club. Um,
Mhm.
Yeah, she does have a mustache also. And so she's standing there and she's approached by a cocktail waitress and she's like, I thought there were no women allowed. And the cocktail waitress is like, but not just as cocktail waitresses, sir. And so she orders a brandy Alexander with skim milk and put it in a parfait glass. And then as the cocktail waitress is about to walk away, Fran, as a man, says, "That's a lovely shade of blush you're wearing." And the cocktail waitress is all flattered. And meanwhile, there's a guy reading a newspaper a few feet from Fran who looks up, and Fran tries to explain that, you know, women love that kind of thing. Chicks
like
right.
To hear stuff.
Right. And so then, you know, we see Maxwell and Glenn come in. And so Fran wants to check her disguise. And so she takes out a compact. But some guys walking by notice her. So she quickly makes it look like it's a cell phone. And says something like, you know, Marianne, cancel my meeting with the professor. And then so she like awkwardly strides over to Glenn and Maxwell and tries to like get in on their conversation. Like the two men are clearly enjoying their each other's company, and they're enjoying their conversation. And so she walks herself over to try to get involved. And so Maxwell turns, doesn't recognize her, and introduces himself as Maxwell Sheffield, and you are Mr. And Fran shakes hands, says, Ed. Mm-hmm. And so then Maxwell makes the introduction to Glenn, Mr. Mitchell, and Glenn says, "Oh, you can call me Glenn." And Fran takes her thumbs under her suspenders and says, "You can call me Wilbert," and like lets go of the suspenders. And guess what? That hurt. Mm-hmm. And so Maxwell mentions that Glenn is a whiz of a stockbroker, and Fran's like, a real hot dog, huh? Mm-hmm. And so this is where things start to get interesting. Do you want me to do this whole scene, or do you want to? Okay.
Go for it.
Excuse me. So Maxwell says that, referring to Glenn, he gave me one hell of a stock tip. My nanny turned me on to him. And Glenn says, his nanny turned me on, period. She is hot. And so, you know, meanwhile, Fran, dressed up as man, was trying to like get Maxwell by himself to probably say, hey, I'm actually Fran. That guy Glenn is not a stockbroker, but a hot dog vendor. But she gets distracted by this conversation about her own hotness, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of like Maxwell was gonna like go for a walk with her, but instead like she decides like, no, let's have this conversation. And so Glenn says, "So Max, what's the story with you and Fran?" And she, as Wilbur, is like, "Yeah, what's the story with you and Fran, Max?" And Glenn continues, "I mean, she's a beautiful woman who lives in your house. Haven't you ever?" Mm-hmm. And like, as Maxwell starts to answer, "Well, to tell you the truth," and the poor cocktail waitress comes with the brandy Alexander and the parfait glass, and Fran's like, "Get out of the way!" Like,
yeah, get out of the way, like,
and pushes her aside and like gets her, because she wants to hear what Maxwell's about to say about her. Mm-hmm. And she missed it, right?
And yeah, she said, missed it.
What'd you say? Yeah.
Missed it.
Exactly. And so Maxwell, you know, is like, well, I have her wrapped around my little finger. And, you know, oh, really? Like, and he says, I say things like, oh, you are so much wiser than I am. The children are so much more comfortable talking to you. And Glenn's like, I can't believe she hasn't caught on yet. And Fran's like, she will. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I think Maxwell takes the check out of his pocket and says, Glenn, before I forget, here's the check. And Fran was between the two men, and she takes the check out of Maxwell's hand before Glenn can take it and says, oh, no business on club premises. I'm a Buddhist. And which I frankly don't understand. And then Glenn takes the check from her and says, I'm not sure this concerns you, Wilbur, old boy. And Fran tries to take it back. I think it does, Glenn, old buddy, or well, something. And needless to say, they're both holding the check, and they end up like fighting over it, right? Like, mm-hmm. They're tugging on it, but Fran loses her grip and her hand flies backwards and hits Maxwell in the nose, right? Like, or right under the eye. and he like falls. And so then
But
Fran
she doesn't
and
even pay attention.
no, she does not. She's still focused on the check and Glenn, and they end up slap fighting each other. Like,
Yep.
it's kind of silly. And then she climbs on a chair and basically jumps on his back
Mm-hmm.
to try to get the check from him, which is an odd thing to do for anybody. And then she's like back on the ground, and then she ends up like shoving / pushing / tossing him into the wall, and he like clonks his head into the wall, turns around, and falls on his butt. And so Fran has the check, grabs the check, and goes to Maxwell finally. And she's like holding his lapels, Mr. Sheffield, Mr. Sheffield. And he's like, Wilbur? And she's like, no, it's me, Miss Fine. And like she has a smile on her face. It's sheepish. And he's like, oh, thank God. For a moment, I found myself oddly attracted to you. I thought 20 years of musical theater had finally taken its toll on me. And, you know, from there, it's sort of, the scene sort of continues to devolve, I guess. And, you know, Fran, like, they've gotten this, the fisticuffs, as silly as they are for us, have gotten the attention of the other men in the room who originally were like checking to see how Glenn was doing. And then they've like turned to Fran and Maxwell, and Fran tries to make a big deal. I came to put an end to this thing between you and Glenn. And Maxwell's like, would you keep your voice down? And he like turns and tries to explain it away. It's all right. We live together. And then he also realizes like that's not really helping his case. And Fran's like, what a bunch of yentas. And then so Fran finally is able to explain, Glenn's not a stockbroker. You're about to give $100,000 to a man that sells hot dogs. And Glenn, who's still clearly dazed, heard the word hot dogs, is like, hot dogs, get your hot dogs here. And Max was like, you lied to me. And Fran adds, he lied to both of us. What, were you using me to get to him? And Glenn's like, I don't even know you. And Fran's like, oh, so I suppose that afternoon in the Hamptons meant nothing to you? And Glenn just kind of looks at her. Fran? Oh, I should have known. No chick could eat a whole 6-pound lobster. And Fran says to Maxwell, I had a Slim Fast for lunch and a sensible dinner. And anyway, she then eventually turns her attention back to Glenn. You said you were a stockbroker. No, I said I worked on Wall Street. Would you have gone out with me if I told you I sold hot dogs? And Fran's like, yes, but now all trust is gone. I can't stand a man who pretends to be something he's not. Which is ridiculous because at the time she's like also like fixing her fake facial hair.
Yes.
And you know, Glenn adds, I was a stockbroker, but I got killed in the 80s. And he starts walking towards the door. All I needed was one big client. And he says to the security guard, Maxwell Sheffield was the man of my dreams. And walks out. Yeah.
Just looks dazed, but yeah, you did a great job with it.
Thank you.
The only thing I would add is that whenever Fran says, oh, she will, in terms of find out, she hits Maxwell.
That's true. She does. Harder than you would expect.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, no, that was a great job, Debbie.
Thank you. Would you like to take us back to the kitchen?
Yes. So we're in the kitchen. Fran, Maxwell, Niles. Maxwell has quite the shiner, they note. And he has a big slab of meat now on his face. So, you know, Niles says he's going to go to the store since dinner is now on, you know, Mr. Sheffield's face.
Yes. Did you catch what Maxwell's response to that was?
No, go ahead.
Perhaps Miss Fine would like to go for you.
Oh, yeah. The falafel.
Yeah. Maybe she can pick up an ex-doctor with his own falafel wagon.
And she's like, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'll do it the old-fashioned way. And I believe it's Niles says fall in love.
Correct.
And she says, no, I just caught the word temple.
Faint and temple.
Faint and temple? Okay.
Yes. She says, no, I've learned my lesson. Besides, if I want to meet a doctor, I'll do it the old-fashioned way. And Niles like, fall in love. And she says, no, faint and temple.
So,
good luck for him.
Yeah. So, you know, Niles is on his way, but Brighton walks in. He's wearing that same outfit that you described earlier, the one with the flannel backwards hat, baggy pants, and he picks up the boom box that was on the kitchen table and that, I think he was walking around with earlier as well. But he goes to put it on his shoulder, to walk around and play, and he turns it on. And it's the song from The Sound of Music that's about the little goat, like
Goat herd.
Yeah, goat herd. And so he stops and he's like, Dad, you should get your own stereo. I was like so close to, being at the park with this.
5 minutes away.
5 minutes away. And he leaves and Fran turns to him, like, to Maxwell, like, what are we going to do about Brenton and the big pants situation? Or is that Maxwell who says that, or is that Fran?
Yeah. He wants to know what we're going to do about it. Yeah.
Oh, well, Mr. Sheffield, you're much wiser than I am, and the children are much more comfortable with you. Echoing back what Maxwell had said, he used, as to keep Fran around his finger, wrapped around his finger.
Correct.
Like that, because Maxwell had, I believe, ended with that phrase before when explaining to Glenn what phrases he used. And then, Maxwell kind of looks, and Fran's like, oh, don't worry. We all have our own phrases that we use to manipulate one another.
Right.
And, Maxwell wants to find out more, but Fran's looking at a magazine and she makes like a non sequitur. She's like, oh, someone needs to talk about Fergie about horizontal stripes. Not a fan of that comment, but anyway, we'll talk about that later. She gets up to leave and he's like, oh, come on, he wants to know. And she's like, but Mr. Sheffield, you're a big Broadway producer and I'm just a nanny. And he kind of puffs up when she says big Broadway producer, and she like leaves
and he says quite right.
And then I think she says number 17 still works to herself.
Correct. Yes.
And of note, through the swing door, she's in the dining room. In
Correct.
The ever-changing layout of the Sheffield residence.
It must be so nice to have a house that just changes shape and gets new rooms and things like that as needed. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that scene?
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
I didn't actually take any notes on the credits if you want to.
So the credit scene, it's back in the Manhattan Men's Club, and the waitress that we saw earlier is kind of cozying up to Fran dressed as a man. And she says, she gets off work in an hour. And Fran says, I have 2 words for you. Crying game. And then she goes and hooks arms with Maxwell and they leave. And the crying game, I can mention in the notable New Yorker section.
Perfect.
So yeah, that is the episode. Just quick overarching stuff before we get into the different shticks. Yeah, shticks. So for me, again, it was just very blatant that last scene going into the dining room. I was just like, yeah, the continuity is not there. But there were a couple of like phrases throughout, or little jabs or jokes throughout that were not great for me. Just in terms of like, again, I think her earlier statement of Tokyo, I'm a little uncomfortable in terms of it like leaning into a stereotype. And then of course, did you understand the Fergie comment at the end?
I thought it was just the general like horizontal stripes are not flattering.
Yeah, but you know who Fergie is, right?
I looked her up for our notable New Yorker segment.
So we can talk about it there. But I mean, there's a larger context to that.
Oh, okay. Then maybe do you want to do that now?
Sure.
Ties in with your I might have totally missed the context that you were looking at.
My understanding is that referring to Duchess Sarah Ferguson, right? That was her name? Sarah? Is it Sarah or something else? She was known as Fergie.
I believe it was Sarah.
Yes. But she was like notoriously mocked for her weight.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure she was like notoriously like just mocked in the media for her weight. And so the horizontal stripes comment, you know,
Mm-hmm.
has to do with that. So anyway, did you, again, we kind of dipped in, but did you have anything you wanted to talk about
So,
first?
just as an overarching point, there was an article on E Online where they asked Fran Drescher about her favorite episodes of The Nanny,
Mm-hmm.
and this episode is on that list.
Interesting.
And her quote from the article was, and I quote, "I got to play a guy for the first time, and the transformation was incredible. I really enjoyed playing a character other than Fran Fine. Plus, I got out of those high heels."
Mm, yeah. And one thing I was going to note is just how did you transform that quickly
I know. I
and
mean,
to that degree, right? Because it
right.
was not a sloppy job.
No, no, not at all. And also, it, I guess the timing also doesn't really make sense
Mm-hmm.
because when Fran asks Cece to kill the deal, um, Cece's like, "Well, right now, you're telling me that right now Maxwell's at the Manhattan Men's Club handing over the $100,000, like right now." Emphasis there. Um, and then Fran had to get there, wherever it is, and then she had to go and transform herself and come back, and Maxwell still hadn't handed the check over yet.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that doesn't really
Yeah.
jive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, this is not to say I didn't enjoy the episode. This is just some of the stuff I wanted to make note of.
Hmm. That's fair. Um, do we want to is do we want to jump to our shticks, or are there other?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So we've already talked about some of the fashion today. We've talked about Fran's colorful outfit that we've seen before. We've talked about
Mm-hmm.
Brighton. Um, I will note that what Cece's wearing in the first scene is what she was wearing in her apartment in the last episode. It's the navy or black dress with the maroon collar and cuffs with the brass button, the two lines of brass buttons down the front to the waist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I rather liked Fran's outfit in the first two scenes when she went grocery shopping. It's like a neon green suit. I could never wear it, but I like it. I think it's nice. It's like a green yellow checkerboard with a black turtleneck. Did you have any favorite fashion in this episode?
I liked the red. Um, Again, is it black jacket blazer?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. It looks to me, it's like a
It was
dress.
longer. Yeah, because it was longer. It was like cut in a certain way. Like
Mm-hmm.
it gave a good silhouette.
Yes.
Um, it went like it was longer, but I believe she had like a skirt or something underneath it
She has a
as
turtleneck.
well.
She's wearing a turtleneck, but I didn't notice her wearing a skirt underneath it. I thought she was
Well,
wearing
she
it
had
as a dress.
something, yeah. I don't know, because then she has like thigh high
Black
black
boots.
boots
Yes.
and like she also has tights like underneath that. But it's a longer, I thought it was nice. Whatever it was.
I mean, it looks nice on her. I guess I didn't like the question of whether it was a dress or whether it was a jacket.
Hmm,
I didn't care for that. The ambiguity bugged me.
what is this?
Exactly. Um, Also, just to mention, Cece's wearing like a also a very bright yellow or green blazer. That's also looks a little dated because it's longer, but I like it when Cece wears bright colors. So
Yeah. Well, and I would say like Maggie, um, whenever she's being asked by Niles and Fran who Cece hates more, her hair was like flipped out and it like very much made me think of those times. Because like I feel like there's some of the fashion kind of mimicked the 60s too. in some way. So anyway,
we'll see more 60s fashion later in the series.
But yeah, anything else you wanted to note about the fashion?
I don't think so. Do you want to jump to our notable New Yorkers?
Yes. So there are quite a few.
Uh-huh.
And again, like the guy who plays Glenn, let's just start with that so we don't forget.
Thank you. Yes, he also was not on my list, but I have like his IMDb page pulled up in the hopes that I don't forget. So go for it.
He's Corbin Burnson. Burnson? I don't know how to
Burnson,
pronounce
I
his
think.
last name. Yeah. But I recognized him. Actually, I believe he was in what's it called? Psych? Wasn't he in Psych?
He was. He played Henry Spencer.
Yes.
According
so
to
that's
IMDb.
where I primarily know him from.
Okay.
So where do you know him from? Or did you know him prior?
I knew him from this.
Oh, interesting.
I knew he had to be famous because with the live studio audience, like as soon as we see him, they broke out in applause. But I'm really bad with actors and actresses. So before this, he would have been in the TV series Ryan's Hope. He was, I think, on Seinfeld for an episode. He was on LA Law as Arnie Becker.
So then her little thing, that makes a lot of sense. Because, she made the little clip at the grocery store. Oh, you don't look like a lawyer. And he's like, why don't I look like a lawyer? And she said, or why can't I pass as a lawyer? And she says, well, not in New York, maybe in LA. That makes sense. Okay.
I'm glad we can piece these things together. Yeah. I knew him from the Nanny.
Okay. Fair. But yeah, so obviously there's a lot of references to various cereal. Lucky Charms, they're magically delicious. Rice Krispies with the snap.
Snap. Bingo, yeah. All three of them.
Mary Lou Retton.
Mm-hmm.
Did we talk about her before?
We did, yes.
Okay.
In the episode The Gym Teacher, she was referred to as Mary Lou Rotten, not Mary Lou Retton. So
gotcha. And Robert Graham, was that an actual? Did you
Yes, Robert Graham was a Mexican artist born in 1938 who created a number of civic monuments. Typically, his work commemorated the human form, and that's according to Wikipedia and robertgrahamartist.com.
Makes sense, since that was a nude bust.
Correct. Yes.
So Fran mentions whenever she's talking about putting cornrows in her father's toupee that she sang "Sunshine of My Life."
Mm-hmm.
Do you have more info on that?
I believe it's a song by Stevie Wonder.
Okay. Do you want to add some?
Sure. So right before the second scene, we get a shot of the market, Gristedes, and I was like, that can't just be like for fun. So I Googled, and Gristedes is a chain of over 30 supermarkets in Manhattan, Westchester, and Brooklyn. The chain started in 1888, and that's according to GristedeSupermarkets.com.
Wow.
So I thought that was interesting because I had no idea. Let's see. I think we mentioned in the scene at breakfast, Carmen Miranda. She was a Portuguese-born Brazilian samba singer, dancer, Broadway actress, and film star who was active from the late 1920s onwards. That was a quote from our friends at Wikipedia. And she wore a signature fruit hat, which was the joke that Maxwell made by trying to hand her the fruit bowl. Adam and Eve, an original sin. Those are references to Genesis, the story of creation from the Bible. Original sin has different there are different views of original sin depending on what religion you are. and I think I'll leave it at that. We've already mentioned Gilligan's Island and Marianne and the Professor. Al Capone, because after Fran realizes she could have dressed up as a cocktail waitress, she's like, I had to go straight to Al Capone. He was a notable American gangster and businessman from the Prohibition era. Mr. Ed, which is the name Fran originally gives herself, was the name of an American sitcom about a talking horse, which I think we've talked about before.
Yes, I think so.
I tried to figure out why it was funny for Fran to say, you can call me Wilbur, and I could not figure out what the etymology of that was.
I feel like,
I wonder if it's a joke to the nanny, but it can't be. Like, I think
it seemed like it was another reference to like an old show.
That was what I first thought, but then I also thought, well, maybe it's a reference to Charlotte's Web with Wilbur the pig, and so she's just like picking barnyard animals to name herself after. I don't know.
Because I also kind of thought Charlotte's Web.
But yeah, that's like my first thought. That's we're literary minds. That's why we go there, clearly. And then I think the last one I have, besides like Big and Tall men's stores and Martha's Vineyard and the Hamptons, would be when Fran tries to get into the club and she's told no women allowed. She says, what is this, the He-Man Woman Haters Club? And my first thought was Al Bundy from Married with Children, but I think it could have been related to something else. It could have been related to.
Well, so my first thought was the Little Rascals.
Exactly, the Little Rascals. Thank you.
Yeah. So in addition to that, I also have earlier when Fran's trying to butter up Cece to like help her out. She, it's like, oh yeah, Glenn thought you looked like Heather Locklear, who's an actress, and to which Cece responds, we never even met. I described him to you. So Heather Locklear. And then again, I'm like 99% sure there was the theme song to I Love Lucy.
Yeah, I was
listeners, watch that scene and let us know.
Yeah, I was choosing to just bypass that entirely. Yeah. But yes, listeners, please let us know.
Yeah, and I already mentioned Fergie.
Yes.
So I'm pretty sure. Well, and I already also mentioned The Sound of Music.
Yes, good catch.
Song. So, yep. And The Crying Game. That's what I wanted to talk about.
Yes, go for it.
I'm trying to, let me do a quick search because I believe it was the 1980s that the movie came out. Big spoiler alert.
It was 1992 thriller, according to Wikipedia.
So it's talking about, it takes place in like Ireland. It's with the backdrop is the Troubles in Northern Ireland. Again, there's all the stuff with the IRA, different soldiers. Anyway, the main character becomes involved with a soldier's lover who, spoiler alert, turns out to be a man. So the opposite gender of what? Because the lover presented as female.
Oh.
It was actually male. So yeah, I actually watched The Crying Game for one of my classes in college. So
I'm not familiar. So, but thank you.
But yeah, but so that's like one of the twists is finding out
that the person presented had hidden their identity very well.
Yes. So that's why Fran says that as she leaves, because she's like, I guess, reverse, hinting that she is actually female.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Thank you. So I think we're up to Yiddish Cup.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what I'm going to say. Bacon, pork rinds, ham, and lobster are all not kosher. Mm-hmm. A rabbi, I don't think we've defined that term before. Rabbi means teacher. It's usually the religious leader of a synagogue. But otherwise it's a learned person learned in Torah, typically. Schmear, I think we've talked about before. It's basically like you put a thin layer or not so thin layer of it's like cream. I think of cream cheese or butter. There actually there were headlines recently about there being a schmear shortage in New York City because cream cheese was caught up in the they couldn't produce it fast enough to meet demand. So
wow.
Adam and Eve, as we kind of mentioned, the story of Genesis, that's in the Torah, so Old Testament. And I mentioned before, original sin, different religions have different views on it. Like Jews, we don't believe in original sin. So
interesting.
There's really no concept of that. Like you're not born like marked by sin. So we can have another discussion about theology on a different podcast. I'm sure our wonderful listeners do not want me to wax poetic about things like that. So yeah. Would you like to take us into 90s nostalgia?
Wait.
What did I miss? Yep. What did I miss? Yenta. I missed Yenta.
Yentas. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Yentas. We've already covered that. Basically a busybody. Yenta's a busybody who likes to put their nose in other people's business. Thank you.
Yep. So on to 90s nostalgia then.
Awesome. There was a lot, I thought.
There was. I mean, Brighton's whole getup.
Yes.
And him walking around with a boombox on his shoulder.
Yes.
Screamed the 90s.
Yes.
And I'll let you have your freebie.
Old cars!
Yes.
Listeners, please tell us if it is annoying that I shout old cars with such enthusiasm every week. And I will do my best to stop if it bothers you. Continue, Bernadette.
Yeah. But also, I don't know to what extent, but it was interesting where they had a tape recorder.
Yes.
Because I'm sure some people still use it. Like, I've seen them around, but I would think much more these days people would just use their like cell phones on their voice app if they need to record something.
Right.
So, yep.
The old phones, which I know we see them often, but like there's that scene where Fran's trying to get Cece to call to kill the deal, and like it's just so highlighted. Also there's the cassette tape that Brighton takes out of the boombox.
And again, I feel like the whole situation of Fran having to go down to the club herself to try to inform Mr. Sheffield that Glenn was actually a hot dog seller.
Correct.
Like that would have been easily resolved with a text today.
Text, a frantic phone call, something. He would have been more accessible.
Yes.
But just as a side note, I do kind of wonder, like when Fran tried to get in the first time and she was told no women allowed, why couldn't the security guy like go get Maxwell?
Yeah. Well, because then we wouldn't have her dressing up as a man.
Fair. But like in reality, that might have happened.
Yeah.
Were you able to catch the prices of anything in the grocery store?
I didn't pay that close of attention to it.
I tried. I couldn't. I mean, I think it was like a box of saltines were $1.55. I think is one of the things I saw, but I couldn't see what the prices were. I just got the sense that the prices were significantly lower than they are today. But that might have been colored by news. So.
Yeah. So, and I will say, I guess some of the lines that, I'm not comfortable with are more in line with like you would see that in every show in the 90s. Those lines, I feel like. So.
That's fair. I have nothing else for 90s nostalgia. Do you have anything else?
I don't believe so. So, can you give us some future fun?
Okay. I have a number of future fun things. They're all relatively small, so I apologize. There is a I'm trying to think which order in which to do them in. I guess I'll start at the beginning. Cece wanting to invest their profits, which apparently are $100,000, in a house in Martha's Vineyard, to me doesn't really make a lot of sense, because I believe we learn in season 5 that Cece has $20 million. And so like,
Wow.
if she wanted, she could just purchase her own house on Martha's Vineyard. Like, she doesn't need to do, I mean, I see why she would want to do with Maxwell, because then, you know, they own property together. And
Yeah, and then she couldn't order around Niles.
true. But again, she could hire her own, you know, staff if she wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a line in the episode Immaculate Concepcion where she says, I have 20 million, I have no pride. I'll leave the rest of the line out because I don't want to give too much away. But yeah, so that was point 1. Point 2, we talked about how Maxwell in this episode prides himself on being a bit of a rebel, and we see him eating, you know, cereal and probably a Pop-Tart as well for breakfast. There's a whole episode in season 4 or 5. I can't remember what the name, where Maxwell's trying to be like, you know, spur of the moment and not as much of a stick in the mud. So it's interesting to me that he was priding himself here on being, you know, a rebel. So in the last real scene, we have Fran comment about how she hasn't seen a shiner this bad since her sister got a nose job. In the episode, The Car Show, we learned that in Fran's neighborhood, kids either, when a girl turns 16, she either gets herself a car or a nose job. And needless to say, Fran got the car. And then I guess I have 2 more. There is an episode called Close Shave. For those who have seen the episode, the series before, that is the episode that has the longest laugh in the entire series. It's the one where Maggie is a candy striper. And for those who've seen the series before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But just to Fran's point about how, you know, if she wants to meet a doctor, she'll do it the old-fashioned way by fainting in temple. She tries to take a different approach when she drops Maggie off as a candy striper. She talks to one of the nurses and says, "Oh, excuse me, I need a doctor." And the nurse says, "What are your symptoms?" And Fran says, "I'm 30 and single." Needless to say, that was not a successful doctor meeting attempt. And then the last thing I'll say is, this is not the only time that Fran is responsible for a very questionable large investment. There's another episode in season 6 where she has the option to stop a questionable large investment and instead of stopping it, has it move forward, and it could have ended very badly. Mm-hmm. So that's all I'll say. That was a little rambling, so I'm sorry. I guess it's time
before we
go ahead.
Do that, I want to correct myself, because I was like thinking about it more and I wanted to make sure I got it correct. So I looked up the Crying Game again, and I do want to note that character is transgender. So I don't mean any offense earlier. She is a woman. Just revealed her transgender status. Okay. Just wanted to say that before we moved on.
Thank you for clarifying, Bernadette.
Yes. Okay.
Our listeners know you are not trying to be offensive.
I apologize. I just wanted to check, because I was like thinking about it. I was like, maybe how I said it earlier was not correct. So transgender. Okay.
Awesome. So I think it's time to rate the episodes. I think it's my turn.
It is your turn.
Yeah, I hate it when it's my turn.
Episode. So
yeah, you keep saying that as if I'm going to remember that I do odd. You do
one day you
will. This is not my favorite episode. I don't particularly love it. This is not an episode I go out of my way to watch, especially considering how strong this season has been otherwise and how strong it's going to continue being as we move forward. I'm going to give it a 3.5. Like, it's not an episode I go out of my way to watch. It's not one that I'm like excited when I watch it. This is not not a great episode in my book. Your turn.
Mm-hmm. So I think I'm gonna follow you with the 3.5. Just because, as I mentioned, some of the things that came up, and like you said, also as it compares to the other episodes we've had, especially recently, it's not quite there, right? So
Right.
I'll give it a 3.5 as well.
Yeah, it's not a bad episode. It's just compared to what we've seen recently and what we're going to see in the next few weeks. So anyway, is there anything else you'd like to talk about before we wrap up?
No, I believe that's it.
All right. So that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 32, Wine Cellar.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.